A picturesque California neighborhood, the epitome of the American dream, about to become the backdrop of a chilling crime that would shock the world. This is the tale of Elliot Rodger, a 22-year-old man whose life took an unimaginably dark turn. Born in London, England, he moved to the United States with his parents at age 5. He was raised in Los Angeles, born into an affluent family. Elliot was raised surrounded by opulence. His father, a successful director in Hollywood, and his mother, a caring homemaker, provided him with a life many could only dream of. Yet as we delve deeper into Elliot's story, we find that not everything that glitters is gold. Growing up, Elliot was a seemingly ordinary child. He attended the best schools, had an array of hobbies, and was intelligent beyond his years. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there was an undercurrent of unease. Despite his privileged upbringing, Elliot often felt isolated and misunderstood. He struggled to make friends, preferring the solitude of his own company. These early signs of social withdrawal, overlooked as mere quirks of a shy child, would later evolve into something far more sinister. As Elliot navigated through adolescence, his challenges grew. He found it increasingly difficult to connect with his peers, his loneliness deepened, and a sense of resentment began to build. He developed an obsession with fitting in, with being accepted, a desire that would later fuel his actions. His parents, recognizing his struggles, sought help. They enlisted the services of therapists, hoping to alleviate their son's inner turmoil. But the darkness within Elliot was growing, evolving from a shadow into a storm. Despite their efforts, Elliot's mental health continued to deteriorate. His writings, later discovered, exposed a disturbing inner world of anger and disillusionment. Elliot was spiraling, and the world around him remained oblivious to the impending tempest. Little did anyone know a dark storm was brewing behind Elliot's quiet demeanor. The unsettling calm before the storm was about to give way, leading to a series of events that would forever change the face of this picturesque Californian neighborhood. Elliot Rodgers, the boy next door with a twisted secret. Elliot Rodgers' life was a complex tapestry of isolation and unaddressed mental health issues. A child ensnared in the throes of loneliness, he was in essence, a boy lost in his own world. Elliot's struggle with mental health was not a sudden occurrence. It had roots that ran deep. It was a slow, gradual descent into a pit of despair that seemed to consume him. His story is a stark reminder of the invisible battles we often fail to see. His struggles were largely hidden, tucked away behind a facade of normalcy. He was a boy who felt alienated, a feeling that was magnified by his inability to connect with those around him. This isolation gnawed at him, feeding his growing resentment toward society. Elliot Rodgers was not just isolated, he was disconnected. He was disconnected from the world around him, disconnected from the people in his life, and most importantly, disconnected from reality. This disconnect was not just a symptom of his mental health issues, it was a consequence. It was the result of a mind that was slowly being consumed by its own darkness. His resentment toward society was not just a byproduct of his isolation, it was a manifestation of his increasing disillusionment. Elliot Rodgers didn't just resent society, he felt betrayed by it. He felt as though he had been promised a life that he was not given, a life that he believed he was entitled to. This sense of entitlement, coupled with his growing disillusionment, created a volatile mix that was a ticking time bomb. His struggles, though hidden, were real. They were a part of his life, a part of his identity. They were the shadows that followed him, the demons that haunted him. They were his reality, a reality that was slowly spiraling out of control. Elliot was spiraling, and the world was yet to feel the impact. Elliot Rodgers, a ticking time bomb, started penning his dark thoughts. As the years passed, Elliot began to articulate his growing resentment and isolation in a 141-page manifesto, chillingly titled, "My Twisted World." It was here that he laid bare his feelings of rejection, his deep-seated hatred towards women, and his disillusionment with society. His manifesto was a harrowing journey into a mind consumed by bitterness. It painted a picture of a young man who felt alienated from the world around him. Elliot perceived himself as a victim, a lonely figure who was shunned by the society he so desperately wanted to fit into. Elliot's writings were laden with his sense of entitlement. He believed he deserved attention, affection, and acceptance from the women around him. When these expectations were not met, it only fueled his anger, his feelings of rejection, and his deep-seated misogyny. In his manifesto, Elliot also expressed his disdain for men who, in his view, were less deserving but more successful with women. This resentment extended to society as a whole, which he believed had failed him. His writings revealed a man who felt ignored, unloved, and unwanted. The Manifesto was a clear indication of Elliot's deteriorating mental state. He was spiraling into a dark abyss of hatred and resentment. His writings were a cry for help, a desperate plea that went unnoticed until it was too late. But Elliot's Manifesto was not just a reflection of his dark thoughts. It was also a blueprint for his planned act of retribution. He detailed his intentions to exact revenge on the society that he believed had rejected him. The Manifesto of Elliot Rodgers, in its raw and disturbing details, provides a glimpse into the mind of a deeply troubled individual. It's a stark reminder of the potential consequences when feelings of isolation, rejection, and entitlement are left unchecked. His manifesto was a chilling prelude to the horror that was about to come. Elliot Rodgers, now consumed by his dark thoughts, began to plot. The transformation was subtle, yet chilling. His mind, once a battlefield of inner struggles and mental issues, was now a command center for a meticulously planned massacre. Elliot's planning was as meticulous as it was disturbing. He considered every detail, every possible outcome. His preparations were done in the shadows, away from prying eyes. He purchased weapons, studied his targets, and familiarized himself with their routines. All this, while maintaining a facade of normality, a mask he wore to keep his horrifying intentions hidden from the world. The chilling precision with which Elliot planned was a stark contrast to his chaotic inner world. He was methodical, leaving no room for error. He planned his actions down to the minute, ensuring that each step would lead him closer to his sinister goal. His plans were like a chess game, each move calculated, each piece carefully placed. And yet, his plans remained hidden. He managed to keep his preparations under wraps, away from the watchful eyes of his family and friends. He managed to keep his intentions concealed, his plans shrouded in secrecy. Despite the darkness brewing within him, to the outside world, Elliot Rodgers remained an ordinary 22-year-old, struggling with the trials and tribulations of life. His ability to hide his intentions was as chilling as his plans. His mask of normality was convincing enough to deceive those around him. His facade was so convincing that it allowed him to proceed with his plans undetected. It allowed him to inch closer to his sinister goal, all while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary young man. Elliot's meticulous planning, his ability to keep his plans hidden, and his convincing facade all came together to create a chillingly perfect storm. A storm that was about to unleash its fury on an unsuspecting world. Elliot was ready to unleash his wrath on the world. His sinister plot was in place, his mask was firmly on, and the world was none the wiser. The stage was set for a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Elliot Rodgers was ready to strike. May 23, 2014, a day that would forever be etched in the annals of crime history. On this day, the peaceful community of Isla Vista, Santa Barbara was shaken to its core as the once quiet and unassuming Elliot Rodgers embarked on a murderous rampage. Rodgers, a 22-year-old boy, meticulously planned and executed a horrific massacre that claimed the lives of 7 innocent people. His victims, all students at the University of California, Santa Barbara, were simply going about their everyday lives when they were abruptly and violently thrust into a terrifying ordeal. The massacre began at Rodgers' own apartment, where 3 young men were brutally stabbed to death. The horror then spilled onto the streets of Isla Vista as Rodgers climbed into his BMW and embarked on a drive-by shooting spree. In the midst of the chaos, he fatally shot 2 women outside a sorority house and a young man at a nearby deli. As police closed in, Rodgers turned his weapon on himself, ending his life in the bloodbath that had held the town in a grip of terror. The aftermath was a scene of devastation and heartbreak. Families were shattered, a community was in mourning, and a nation was left in shock. In the wake of the tragedy, a chilling manifesto and a series of videos were discovered, shedding light on Rodgers' deeply disturbed state of mind and his twisted motivations. The documents painted a picture of a young man plagued by loneliness, rejection, and a deep-seated hatred for those he believed had wronged him. As news of the massacre spread, it sparked a wave of outrage and calls for action. The senseless loss of life ignited debates on gun control, mental health, and the toxic culture of entitlement and misogyny that had fueled Rodgers' deadly rage. In just a few minutes, Elliot Rodgers had turned a peaceful neighborhood into a scene of horror. The massacre left an indelible mark on Santa Barbara, and the memory of that fateful day continues to haunt the survivors and the families of the victims. The aftermath of Elliot Rodgers' rampage left a community in shock and a nation in mourning. As the sun rose on the day following the massacre, the picturesque streets of Santa Barbara were eerily silent. A pall of sorrow and disbelief had descended, shrouding the usually vibrant community. The echoes of laughter and the chatter of daily life were replaced by a deafening silence, punctuated only by the occasional wail of a siren or the whispered prayers of mourners. News of the tragedy spread like wildfire, consuming every news channel, every radio station, every social media feed. Images of Elliot Rodgers, a once seemingly average 22-year-old, now stared out from every screen, his name forever etched into the annals of infamy. The media dissected his life, his manifesto, his madness, in an attempt to make sense of the senseless. The public reaction was one of horror and disbelief. How could a young man, barely out of his teens, commit such an atrocity? Questions were asked, fingers were pointed, but the answers remained elusive. Some blamed the mental health system, others pointed at the ease of acquiring firearms, while others still simply shook their heads in helpless despair. As the days turned into weeks, the shock slowly gave way to a grim acceptance. The makeshift memorials of flowers and candles began to wilt and burn out, their bright colors and flickering lights a stark contrast to the dark shadow that had fallen over Santa Barbara. Yet, the sense of loss remained, a constant reminder of the lives cut short, the futures stolen, the innocence lost. In the midst of this chaos, a chilling reality began to emerge. Elliot Rodgers had achieved his twisted goal. His name was on everyone's lips, his face plastered on every screen. He had become a symbol of terror, a specter haunting the collective consciousness of a nation. He had become, in his own dark and twisted way, immortal. Elliot Rodgers had achieved what he wanted. He was now infamous. In the wake of the massacre, a desperate search for answers began. As the dust settled on the horrifying events in Santa Barbara, the focus shifted to understanding the man behind the tragedy, Elliot Rodgers. A 22-year-old who had been living an outwardly normal life had committed an atrocity that sent shockwaves through the community and far beyond. Investigators delved deep into Rodgers' life, sifting through every detail in an attempt to piece together the puzzle of his mind. They uncovered a complex picture of a young man grappling with severe mental health issues, a fact that had been largely overlooked by those closest to him. In the years leading up to the event, Rodgers had been seeing multiple therapists, a clear sign that he was struggling. Yet despite the assistance, his mental health continued to deteriorate. It was a gradual descent into madness, marked by an increasing obsession with violence and revenge. His online activity painted an even darker picture. In the vast digital world, Rodgers found an echo chamber that amplified his destructive thoughts. His posts, filled with resentment and hatred, were blatant cries for help, but tragically they went unnoticed, until it was too late. There was also a chilling manifesto, a detailed account of his life and his sinister plans. Rodgers had meticulously outlined his intentions, laying bare his disturbed psyche for the world to see. Yet, despite the alarming content, the manifesto had been dismissed as the ramblings of a troubled mind. The investigation into Rodgers' life revealed a series of missed warning signs, a tragic failure to recognize the severity of his mental state. The world was left questioning how such a tragedy could have been prevented. Could early intervention have changed the course of events? Or was Rodgers' fate sealed by his own internal demons? In the end, the search for answers only led to more questions. The tragedy laid bare the complexities of mental health and the urgent need for vigilance and understanding. The world was left grappling with the disturbing reality of Elliot Rodgers. Elliot Rodgers' legacy is a stark reminder of the silent battles some people fight. His actions, horrifying as they were, drew attention to the urgent need for mental health awareness and intervention. In the wake of the tragedy, conversations about mental health issues have taken center stage. The society has been forced to confront the reality of untreated mental illnesses and their potential consequences. A shift in societal attitudes can be seen, with a greater emphasis on mental health education and resources. Schools, workplaces, and communities have begun to incorporate mental health programs and support systems. The aim is to ensure that those grappling with their inner demons do not feel alone or ignored. In the legal landscape too, the incident has fueled debates about stricter gun control laws and the role of mental health evaluations in responsible gun ownership. Elliot Rodgers, a name that will forever be associated with a chilling tragedy, serves as a grim reminder of the importance of mental health awareness.